In today's episode, we'll be doing some sanding, some plastering, some fixing, some more sanding, working with our small scissors again, and struggling with junk sandpaper. So the time has finally arrived to start bodywork on this load bed. To be honest, I was really not looking forward to this. This thing is in bad shape. As you can see, there is some bodywork that's already been done to it, some body filler work, some knocking out of dents with a big hammer, and you know what they say, the bigger the problem, the bigger the hammer. So, let's carry on, get some work done here. And out comes the small scissors again. At this stage, we are basically just sanding this panel nice and flat to get it ready for the next step. The next step would be a very fine layer of finishing putty that will give us a nice flat surface to sand down and have a nice uniform flat area. But of course, before we do any more body work, we need to clean this panel, otherwise that putty won't stick. Now what we've got here is called a glaze filler. You basically use this to apply a thin layer of putty all over the area that you are working on. It just makes it nice and uniform and you can sand it nice and flat. As you can see, the stuff is quite runny and yeah, you'll see just now how runny it really is. And sometimes with that grey hair comes wisdom. This is now where years of building things and plastering things comes in quite handy. Okay, so after a lot of sanding and a lot of filler and more sanding, this is basically where we are right now. Now there's still a few spots that I need to just fill up and smooth out. Like for instance right there. Still a few little spots like that. But overall, it's almost ready for primer. Almost there. Okay, so we've gone over the whole body, filled in all the little holes and things, gave all the marks weak sanding, and now I'm quickly gonna go over the whole thing with a 180 grit sandpaper just to get everything nice and smooth again. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you have junk sanding pipe. Okay, so at this stage, it's quite nice and smooth. What I'm doing now is getting all these little marks. It's like stone chips in the old paint. I need to smooth all of them out. Otherwise, when you paint over it, it's a little indent. You are going to see that. And then there's also still a few rough spots on this bodywork, so I'll probably sand on that a bit more. I managed to find a bit better sandpaper. That is aluminium oxide paper, and that seems to be doing a bit better than that 180 grit that I had. That stuff was absolute junk. So let me carry on with this, and I'll bring you in once that is done. All right, so I think the bodywork on this side is done. Sanding is done. We can now basically turn this thing around and do the other side. Eesh. Okay, so looking at this side, we don't have nearly as many stone chips, but if you look at the color, you can see there was a lot of bodywork done. So we have to get all this filler sanded nice and smooth. I can see it. There's a lot of sanding in there already, but there's quite a few marks that needs to be sanded out. Get it nice and smooth. So let me start sanding again. Well guys, that was a lot of sanding to get this load bin straight, but worth the effort. Remember, your finished job depends on the prep, so put in the effort. It will be worth it in the end. In the next video, we'll finish up with a few more marks that is left to sand down, and this load bin will be ready for primer. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon with another video.